Hi, this is Scott. I really appreciate our sponsors because they make the show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Developer Express. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress controls and libraries. Deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today. By leveraging your existing knowledge, you can build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. You can download your free 30-day trial at dx.hanselminutes.com. That's dx.hanselminutes.com.
From hanselminutes.com, it's Hansel Minutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 543. In this episode, Scott talks with Daphne Chong about becoming a more social developer.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today we're talking with Daphne Chong. She is a longtime tech lead and developer. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, Scott. How are you?
I'm lovely, and you're calling me from Australia, and I appreciate you dealing with all the time zones.
Oh, yeah. It is a bit tricky with the West Coast.
Yeah, it's like 17 hours in the past or something. I don't know where you are, if you're the future or the past right now, but I appreciate your time.
Want to know what's going to happen tomorrow, just give me a call.
Yeah. So we met at NDC, this conference in Sydney a while back, and we had a really great chat. And like really good chats, it felt like the kind of thing that you wanted to record. So, I wish I could just, have a great chat and go, I'm going to suddenly make that chat a podcast. But I can't always. But I am fortunate enough to talk to you again. And the topic that we were thinking about was this idea of personal development, but not just personal development, kind of continuous personal development, always thinking about how to improve yourself, particularly in the space of being a better developer.
Yeah. It's something that I really like to kind of set goals for myself and try to think about what I'm going to learn next. And I think as developers, you've kind of got to always be constantly learning something, because what you're working on now will probably not be the same in another, 3 or 5 years. And I always just think it's really good to think about what's next you actually want to do and give it a go.
Is it something that you have to do consciously, or is this something that's innate? Is it built in? I mean, are we always improving without doing anything about it?
I don't feel that way. I always have to put in some conscious effort, I think. When you look around at other people, it always feels like everyone's smarter than you. It looks like there's all these people achieving all these great things. And I think if you are willing to invest sort of small steps to improve or change your skills or what you do, you can kind of get to the same places where they are. And that's not something that's really obvious. It's not obvious. You've got to think about specifically, taking conscious steps to kind of do things like that.
Mm-hmm. Why does it feel, though, like, not to get too imposter syndrome, but it feels like everyone around me is smarter, and it's just like, I'm just making it up as I go along. I feel like I'm constantly having to learn just to catch up.
Yeah, I think there's going to be skills that everybody is good at and skills that everybody needs to improve on. And it's always kind of daunting to start wherever it is that you go. And you kind of need to think about what do you do well? There's going to be things that you are really good at doing. So you might be really good at explaining things to people, or you might be really good at, taking a framework and deeply kind of digging into it and understanding how it works. And, the ways that you're going to learn different skills are going to depend how well you do things currently. So if you're really good at details, you might need a really solid block of time to just sit down with a new technology or a new thing and, dive deeply into how it works. But if you're much more good at kind of working with things on the fly, you could hear an explanation about some new tech from somebody, go read a blog post, and you're like, oh, cool, I understand how that's going to work. And I think that's just going to be different for everybody. And so, me personally, I don't read things off blogs and then go, yeah, cool, I understand how that works. I need to actually sort of sit down and play with something, or actually go through probably a more structured kind of thing, like a tutorial or some kind of book that, explains where all the aspects of these things are. And that's how I feel like I learn best. So I try to make sure that when I'm picking up something new, I'm doing it that way rather than trying to learn a different way, which won't be as successful for me. And that will mean that I will not feel like I will feel like a little bit like I have not learned this well or failed at learning this well, when in fact I just didn't set myself up to try and learn in the best way that I can.
Right. And it seems like it's also important to remember that everyone in tech is always learning. Like 5 years ago, I was doing, .NET 2.0 or whatever. And 5 years before that, it was COM and DCOM and C++. And 5 years before that, it was Pascal. So what I learned in school from a language and computers perspective is completely obsolete at this point. So like you said, what am I good at? Right.
Yeah. Well,
certainly, yeah.
Totally right. There's going to be what's important is that you learn how you learn, or learn how to learn, and that's going to set you up for the next sort of 10, 20, 30 years of your career, because people are going to your skills on how to learn and how to pick up things are valued, not what specifically what you currently know, because that won't be applicable in 5 years.
It seems like there's different levels at which people kind of interview at too. I had a friend who is a longtime C# developer, and they went and interviewed at a big Ruby on Rails shop. And I was like, how is that even like possible? That's just like, you speak French. Why are you interviewing in Spain? And they were like, well, no, they just wanted to know how, my thoughts on architecture, my thoughts on debugging, and whether I could explain things and, how I think. And they weren't worried about the language. And I thought to myself, you don't really hear that a lot. People feel that they need to be experts before they go and apply, before they go and get a job.
Yeah, I think that's great. Employers that interview like that are fantastic, because they're kind of looking more at what's your experience, what are your opinions that have led you to kind of here. It's much more kind of general overview about you than, specifically, do you know what this framework does when you put it under these conditions? And if you don't fail, we don't want to talk to you. So it's great. It's great when people kind of look a bit more at the wider picture about you and your skills.
Right. This isn't Jeopardy. I don't want you asking me trivia questions about Python. I want to know if you care about how I learn. And you have to learn how you learn. Like, are you a kinesthetic learner or are you an auditory learner?
Yes, actually, that's great. That is it's a great point, because I always like, if I can hear somebody saying something to me, I'll recall that much better than other people who might have to do it. I wasn't sure, what was the first term you used?
Kinesthetic?
Yeah.
Like kinetic, and how do you can you touch things and can you feel things?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Kinesthetic learning is like carrying out physical activities rather than doing lectures and watching demonstrations. Like today, I was putting together something with my nephew, an Adafruit electronics project, and I had to keep catching myself I was doing the screwing in the screws and, doing the soldering, and I would just have to stop and say, he may not be learning. Right. Because I'm doing it. So I had to I would do one screw and then I would hand it to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't know how he learns.
Yeah, yeah. And, same thing in development. I think you always remember, gotchas in software or languages when you've had to go and fix the bug that, was there. If someone else told you, I fixed it by, changing this, you're like, oh, cool. But, you always remember that bug 10 years ago that you fixed.
Right. The $1 million semicolon.
3 days hunting it down.
Yeah. So you're telling me that you have to figure out what it is that you know how to do well. And that sometimes means you just sit down and think about that. Like you should almost schedule time to think about how you learn. You can't just come up with this spontaneously.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, kind of experiment and say, all right, I'd like to learn Ruby. Maybe this week I'll try reading a book about Ruby, and next week I'll try doing a tutorial about Ruby. And the week after, maybe I'll go to a user group and hear somebody talk about, Ruby. And whichever one of those sort of works more for you, you can go, okay, this is a way that I seem to be picking up things. Or, you just try bashing it out and going to Stack Overflow and whenever you get stuck on a problem. And I think all of those things sort of tell you a little bit about what's going to work best for you. And you can just apply that to things in future that you'll want to pick up as well. So Python next month or next year or whatever. Yeah.
Doesn't that require maybe a level of confidence to say, I don't know something? Like you and I have been doing this for many years, right? We have many decades between us. But I suspect that both of us could say, like we could show up at a user group and say, I don't know anything about Ruby. I know nothing. And we would be okay with that. But a beginner might be nervous that by doing that, they're going to expose themselves.
That is extremely true. And I think, there's a line where people kind of have to just take a bit of a leap of faith. And I know, me personally, for many years, I never really felt like I wanted to participate in things like that because I felt like, I don't know enough. I'm not on the same level as these people. I would go to user groups and I would be really quiet. I would just observe what was going on. And I never really felt brave enough to want to contribute to anything there. I still do not have a Stack Overflow profile where I've answered, questions because that's still something that I feel like I can improve on. But I think if you find a way that works for you in terms of learning and you can see progress, I think that's a really great sort of feedback loop for you. You can feel like you're improving on something. And, for me, the, kind of way I felt like I started to learn or started to kind of open up to things was actually, about blogging. So I started writing a few posts about different things that I was just working on and experimenting with. And I didn't do that until I was, 30. And so there's like a whole 5-10 years of development work that I had done previously that I had no public voice or record on. And even in sort of a few years since then, I feel like I've made quite a lot of change in how I approach and how open I am. And that's actually given me a lot more opportunities in future to kind of deal with things. For example, being on a podcast talking to you, which is not something that I, would have done if I had just continued to be not open to taking chances and learning.
Yeah. Somewhat insular.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm happy that I can look back on 15 years plus of blogging and say, or gosh, even more than that, and say, look, I can Google myself, and it's almost like a diary, and I can say, oh, wow, I can't believe I was thinking about that. But Google myself, not myself like in an ego way, but Google myself like, wow, what was I doing in 1998? What was I doing in 2002 from a technical perspective?
Yeah.
So, okay, so you started to force yourself to learn. You started to go out there and be open to new things. So for you, the first step was going from being kind of a regular day job programmer to a day job programmer with a blog.
Yes.
Where did you go from there?
I think actually the big driver for me was, I wanted to, well, it's always kind of about this, but I wanted to be able to get jobs easier. I wanted to, get the next job, more easily than I had because I knew I was a good developer. I had enough skills on my CV to, be qualified for interviews, but sometimes I would submit and I wouldn't hear back from companies that I actually wanted to work for. And I thought, okay, there's more to me than these 2 pages that are on my CV or on my resume that people are getting. So what can I do to actually sort of get my authentic voice out there? And so the blog was one thing. And then I started actually going to more meetup groups just to kind of get exposed to different sort of tech, but actually sort of talking to people there, making a few connections with people, learning a bit about what they were working on, and going to hackathons as well, which I always find really fun. It's a really, a weekend, and you kind of build something and you learn a new piece of tech that you never would have before. And it's always great to see what people can achieve in that time. So I found them really inspiring. But the kind of doing these and then actually blogging about them as well gave me a bit more surface area.
I like that you said that, because a lot of times I'll talk to people and they'll say, how do you find topics? I don't have anything to say. And I keep thinking to myself, well, it's not about you making a declarative statement about a technology all the time. It's about your experiences. And if you go to a hackathon and you build something, then you have the right to talk about it. And that's your opinion and your viewpoint and your experience, and your experience is valid. Therefore, there's a potential talk or a YouTube video or a podcast or a whatever. Like, there's so much quote unquote content being created by you just waking up in the morning and building stuff.
Absolutely. That's a really important point that you've made. It's no one can challenge you on your experience. It's kind of experience versus expertise. That was my massive realization, I think, that I had a voice. I could contribute something that was my experience that someone else might find useful, because there's always going to be people who are going to find what you've done. They will be in the same boat at some point. They may be like, oh, hey, I'm trying to learn Ruby as well. Oh, look, someone's written a blog post about how they got on board with doing something in Ruby. And someone will find your output valuable. And I think you just need to assume that you put your voice out there, even if there was only one other person who might find that valuable. If that one other person is actually your future employer, that's a win for you. That's, I think, particularly for me, after doing a bit more sort of involvement in community and in hackathons and things like that, I actually started to help run a user group in Sydney called Women Who Code. And that's been a really fantastic thing for me for the last couple of years. There's a group of sort of now 5 of us who are running different workshops every sort of month. In fact, we're now probably up to 2 a month on different technologies. But it's just fun to be able to have a regular way to meet up with people who are in industry who are similar to you, who are like you. I mean, obviously there aren't that many women in tech in a lot of different places, and we can improve those numbers. But it gave me so much confidence to actually feel like I belonged to a group, and that's not necessarily going to be for everyone else. Your group might be a Ruby group or a Python group or a, kind of data kind of thing. But if you find a group of people who are doing similar things to you and are keen to learn similar things to you, that's going to be so helpful in feedback, and even just like, oh yeah, that, tell me about what you just learned, because that sounds really interesting and I might go and want to do that too. So that, the network and the support is great.
And the group can be whatever aspect of your life you find the most important, or whatever tribe that you're looking for that you find the most welcoming. Yeah. Right? It could be data scientists, or it could be people of color, or it could be diabetics, right? Yes. Like, I have a tribe of people that are diabetics that are always working on hardware to solve diabetes problems. I met a really interesting person who was working on, I actually had him on the show. He had a brother who had a neuro disorder, so he could only move the computer with his eyes. Oh, wow. So he made a whole system to do that. And there's a tribe of people out there that are interested in what you have to say. So whether it's indigenous people or whether it's big data, like, pick your tribe and be welcomed. And if you initially go out and find a group and you aren't welcomed, well, darn it, there's a group out there that will welcome you,
Yeah. It's kind of a part of learning as well, in that not everything you try is going to be successful the first time. And you need to...
That's a hard one.
Yeah. You just need to remember that people like John Skeet, who are he's the number one contributor on Stack Overflow. He had to start somewhere. Everybody starts from somewhere, and persistence is just as important as kind of execution.
So you started with the blog and then doing meetup groups. How did you then start your own group? That seems like another leap.
I actually helped to take it over from a couple of other women who had started up the group a few months before we actually took it over, because they both went to America, which was fantastic. So there was kind of already a bit of a framework there for us to just sort of step in and run with. But in terms of that was great for me because I learned a whole bunch of other things that I hadn't before, like how to organize meetups on a monthly basis, what kind of things we need, and just even really rewarding kind of seeing people getting stuck into coding who may not have done it before. And that kind of made me realize that I was actually quite interested in education and learning, or how people learn. Because if you run sort of tutorials for different things, you can see what works and what doesn't, and how we can optimize things to make it really good for people, different people. And that actually, I ran a few groups, tutorials there in Women Who Code, and that actually sort of woke up a bit of a different bug in me, which was actually public speaking. Because, there's a lot of other people who are out there who like to talk about their work. And I never envisaged myself as being someone who would want to go up on stage in front of everybody to talk about something I would work on. But I actually got a really good opportunity through a group called YOW in Australia. They run conferences in many different cities throughout the year, and they noticed the diversity of their speakers wasn't great, and they really wanted more female speakers. So they ran a competition to help train or find and train 10 women to come in for a one-day speaking training course with someone with Damien Conway.
Oh, wow.
He is a big person in the Perl community, but he also runs workshops on how to give technical presentations. And that was hugely valuable. I found that really great. I learned so much from that day because you had to prepare a short talk and actually present it, and you got to watch everybody else do the same thing. And that was a sort of a turning point for me, going, okay, you can see where everybody else is kind of starting from and where they're trying to get to. All that's required from this point is kind of like effort and practice and kind of getting there. He actually, sorry, just to point out, he's got a YouTube video of that presentation called Instantly Better Presentations. And I highly recommend, if you're a technical person and you're looking to work out how to present things, that's a really valuable video to watch.
That's cool. I'll find that and put that in the show notes. Tiny side question. Was that, I think that's really cool though, not just to say, hey, we need more, women speakers, we need more, different folks, different folks with different voices, but to say, and we'll give you training.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. Was that comfortable though? Was that okay to have, just coincidentally for whatever, I mean, Damien's a legend, but to have a guy presenting on how to present to a bunch of women? Would it have been helpful to have a woman helping, or did that matter?
It didn't matter to me personally. The industry.
He's such a great speaker.
As long as it is, it's someone who's got something to say and something to contribute and to be open and willing to actually help, male or female. It just happened to be that they were running this workshop for female speakers, and I think it's great that they did it in the first place anyway. I mean, they covered costs. It was a brilliant gesture to kind of make. So I was really grateful to Yao. And what they did as a result of that was say, hey, cool. We're now going to give you a series of 3 talks in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane as presentations. So could you please, come up with something? And I ended up presenting on a system I had been working on at work, which is a new video transcoding system for the ABC, which is Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And that was really great. I really enjoyed kind of doing that series, and I also enjoyed kind of working on that system. So it was a big confluence of all things that tied up together really well.
So at that point, then, you've got the bug, right? You've given presentations in 3 different cities, and now you go and submit your name to other conferences. You've got a CV that not only has lots of experience, but also user group running and a blog, and now you've spoken. So now you're on the speaker circuit, basically.
Yeah.
International
speaker. No, I see. Yeah. It's so funny because out of your mouth, the way you say that sounds way more impressive than to me, where I'm like, all these people had to give me all these opportunities to end up speaking, because for NDC,
everyone had to get that opportunity.
Yeah,
right?
It's so true. I think even just this conversation has just totally clarified that for me, because, the way you say that, the way that sounds, is just, yeah, it is not how I would describe it to someone. And for NDC, where I met you last week, someone had to encourage me to actually submit that talk to the agenda. And
I tell you though, there's a big difference though between like giving someone something, like here is a talk, everything is handled, you just need to show up, versus giving someone an opportunity, which is like, hey, there's a door over there. I've stuck my foot in it. Would you go and kick it open for me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As a friend of mine who I've known for freaking 20 years, and she's just a brilliant developer, and I've worked with her many, many years, and she now works for the government. And then when I was the chair of OzCon, her name's Kathy Lee. She does some really amazing work for the government, and I said, you should do a talk at OzCon. And she was like, oh, no, there's just no way. And I was like, no, you should do this. You're awesome. You're amazing. And you should do this talk. And from my perspective, that right there, that was the extent of my involvement, right? And she gave that talk and she kicked that talk's butt. It was awesome. It was fantastic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she came back later very appreciative, but I did nothing. Like, I've just told you what I did. You know what I mean? You can do it. Head that direction. People should give themselves more credit.
Yes, absolutely. And even what you did though was just give her a little bit of confidence.
Just a little shove off the cliff.
Yeah. Well, yeah. the cliff's all right. I think I have found, doing a lot of things in groups has been really helpful for that, kind of like building up confidence, because if you don't feel like you're alone, then it's so much easier to kind of, or even admit that you don't know something or that you need help for something. Like one thing that I've actually found as well with this whole learning thing is, I've been in a few study groups where as a group, there's a bunch of people who decide they want to learn something. And they're great because no one's saying, hey, I am the expert, I will teach you. It's all these people saying, all right, we don't know we don't know this, but we all want to learn how to do it. And we set aside time every week to meet up and do a bunch of exercises or, an assignment, if you like. It's a little bit like a self-arranged class. But at the end of the course, you have looked back and realized, hey, I just learned JavaScript, or I just learned a bunch of data structures and algorithms that I didn't know very well before. And those are both study groups that I've participated in or run. And that's been hugely valuable because people are coming here admitting that they want to learn and they don't know. And that's totally okay. There is no expert there. And that's been really good for support as well, generally.
And calling it back to the beginning where you were talking about the different ways that people learn, I think that developers think that there's user groups and there's conferences, and you pointed out that there's study groups and there's pair programming and there's, Skyping with friends in another country and sharing your screen and pair programming. And I recently learned that there's a thing called mob programming.
Oh, yeah,
heard about this? Having like 10 people in a room all programming on the same thing, and you take turns on the keyboard. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. But then someone's going to discover that not only is it a thing, but it's the thing that absolutely like turned the light on for them.
Yeah.
So there's other opportunities out there than just going to user groups and listening to people talk.
Yes, always. Always. I think that that's a very excellent point, that It's not just conferences and meetups. There's so many other ways to kind of learn. Even Stack Overflow, I think, is great. If you know a little bit about a particular piece of technology or a framework or something, you can answer questions from people who, are looking for help. And that's going to help you feel, hey, cool, I do know a little bit about this. Or if you don't know, hey, you might go and research about what it is so you can help them answer the question. And now you've suddenly learned more than you knew before. So doing a talk or something like that takes a lot of prep, but answering a Stack Overflow question might only be 10 minutes of your time, half an hour of your time.
Right.
Yeah.
But so it takes a lot of prep, but it sounds like you particularly, to accomplish these things, kind of committed to a goal and basically assigned yourself some deadlines.
Yes. I've got this phrase I love, which is called deadline-driven development. And I think a lot of people probably suffer from this as well. If you just say, yeah, cool, I would really like to learn Ruby, I'll just get around to reading that book or that blog post later, you're not going to get there. Whereas if you set yourself a goal and be like, all right, I am going to go and give a talk at my local user group about Ruby in 2 months, that means I have to go and learn how to do it, work out what I want to put in the talk, so I'm ready to actually give that talk. And I think the study groups are actually fantastic for that, because you've got a weekly thing that you can't shift. That's it. That's the time and date that you're meeting up every week. And so if you haven't done your work by then you miss out. It's kind of an opportunity that you are missing out on, rather than someone judging you on. So yeah, I like deadlines. I try to set myself goals. Personally, I kind of try and do one sort of every year. So 2016 is my year of public speaking. 2015 was my year of kind of working out more about algorithms and data structures. 2014 was JavaScript. So yeah, I'm not sure what 2017 will be, but we'll get around to it.
That's really cool. It sounds like you have found your voice, and you're starting to put it out there in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I'm really excited by that. I'm really excited by the kind of things that have changed in my life compared to 5 years ago. From a career perspective, it just feels really different. So it's all about sort of starting small and doing what you think you can do now, and you'll find that it helps you get bigger things on and on in future. And yeah, I would not have predicted to you that I would be talking to you in a podcast. Yeah.
But you did it. You've done these things, and they didn't just happen. They happened because you were conscious, and it's continuous personal development.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Scott. I had a blast.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.